Hi friend, welcome to the live study channel. Today I am going to discuss WebLogic interview question and answer. First question is, what is WebLogic? WebLogic Server is an application server platform to grow and install multi-tier distributed enterprise application. This server concentrates on application service like web server, functionalities, business components, and access to backend enterprise system. It uses technologies like caching and connection pooling to enhance resource use and application performance. It is also provide enterprise level security and administration facility. Second question is, how do you troubleshoot server hanging? It's a very most important question for interview room. It's a hanging problem. We can use in Java WebLogic admin ping to see if get a traditional response. We need to require multiple thread dump with kill 3 pin PID on Unix control break on window. Analyze the thread dump to seek out the basic caches. Means basically it's a pin. Suppose you can see on server. Suppose just I am check the network is working perfect or not. Then I can ping like 10.8.12.8 IP address. If ping is continuous working, then network is fine, otherwise maybe issue. Okay, next question is, what is a WebLogic server and what purpose does its service? So WebLogic server is an Oracle offering a Java based application server that can host Java based application. And WebLogic application and enterprise application that are developed can be developed in a WebLogic server. To shove the business logic to input, to put it is layman's word, with a WebLogic server, we can easily deploy distributed run Java based application. Okay. Next question is, explain deployment descriptors. Deployment descriptors are associated with almost all the module as well application. The deployment descriptor can be seen in the form of XML documents, and they are capable of describing the content that are part of directory or the jar file. J2EE specification usually define the standard as well as deployment descriptor, which are portable for Java J2EE application and module. Means Spring Boot, Hibernate, JPA repository. Next question is, what is web.xml. Web.xml is an XML document that is mainly for application purpose, and it helps in listening out the J2E component and configuration that of your application in J2E module format. Means web.xml you can add also, and you can contain and add dependencies. Okay, next question is, what is the name of default JVM that is made use for WebLogic? The Sun host port JDK means Java Development Kit. Default mode used for development JRock Kit. It is one used for production of WebLogic. Currently 11G as the version 12C operating system is another fact that help is choosing the certificate JDK and JVM. Means is a full form of JDK Java Development Kit, and JVM is a very most important part of the Java. JVM means Java Virtual Machine. Okay. Machine. Next question is, explain the method for providing user credentials for starting the server. At the time of the creation of domain, the word for setting configuration asks for the detail like username, password, more about like username, password, mobile number, so on, from the user who is logging in the first time as an administrator. If the domain is created in development mode, the configuration would save the created password as well as the username inside an identify file. This file is available for reference during the time of booting, so that in the absence of this file, the system can promote the user for the purpose of entering credentials. A new boot identity file can be created. If you want to change the user credential or else if you are having the requirement of creating domain in the production mode. Here some is encrypted, means how to encrypt the password. Basically is a database data sent to the database and password saved in encrypted form. Like suppose I am typing password 1234, but in an encrypted form maybe create like a sequence as has 1 2 5 7 like this, save in SQL at Oracle database. Okay, move to the another question. Another question is, what is node measurement? Node manager could also be a program that used to control WebLogic service in instance on the one node. Here the manager work is to manage all of the service running on a uniform machine or different machine. These instances can reside in a service cluster domain and such. You would like to configure each machine in your domain to talk about the node measurement. Another question is, how do you change from development mode to production mode in WebLogic? 10.3. To change WebLogic startup mode from developer to production, a way to verify it is simply editing set domain .cmd file which reside in a root domain. In the file, it is defined the has root domain bin folder. Look the root that set the production mode. A script variable set production mode also add false to be worth of the production mode. Variable to make sure the server start in development set true for starting is pro mode. The set pro mode is false. Save your change and edit the text editor. Okay. Another question is, why there is no polymorphic type response from a create or find method. Create method or find method. The EGB specification prohibits this type of function and then the WebLogic.bc compiler check for this working condition and prohibits any polymorphic sort of response from a create method or find method. The reason they create method and find method are not polymorphic is analogous to the rationals. Constructor are not polymorphic in Java. The derived classes generally does not know or can't initialize the bottom class property. Another question is, why did my JDBC code through a rollback SQL Java database connectivity code may throw the next exceptions? The coordinator has rolled back the transaction. No further transaction is allowed within the transaction. The WebLogic JDBC driver through this exception when this JDBC connection transaction rollback before or during the JDBC call. These irregularities indicate that the transaction during the JDBC connection was rolled back at the some point before or during the JDBC call. The rollback may have happened in an earlier EJB invoke that was a neighborhood of the transaction, or the rollback may have occurred because the transaction timeout. In earlier case, the transaction are getting to be rolled back, the connection returned to the pool, and thus the database resource realized to travel front at the JDBC connection must be closed and it must be reopened during a replacement transaction. Next question is, include to create a profession as Oracle WebLogic developer. Then here is that the blog post on Oracle WebLogic training when it utilize a resource adapter to WebLogic. Means you can use dot order file. Next question is classes placed within the WebLogic class path. As an example, I am deploying an EJB and a resource adapter .rar file. The EJB has no dependency on the .rar file because the EJB is writing to the common client interface, means CCI. The EJB application send marshals as parameter classes that are explained within the RAR file. For a few reasons, the EJB class loader cannot find the definition of this .rar specification path, albeit the file deploying successfully. I received the subsequent error on the EJB client java.rm file. Unmarshal exception error. Unmarshalling arguments nested exception is java.long class not found exception. You can use is a com.mycompany.interaction specific implementation. Another question is how do stub function inside WebLogic server cluster at the time of failure. The stubs perform the removing the failed instance from the list whenever it got failed. The stub usually make use of DNS for locating the running server and also for obtaining the list of instances that are currently available with the appliance. The list which is available of the instance with the server inside cluster gets periodically refreshment and allow in a acquiring advantage related to new server. The benefits are gained because the server get added to the cluster. Another question is what are the application in WebSphere? WebSphere application use the subsequent sort of technology Java describing and other standard for developing application. WebSphere programming module extension to reinforce application functionalities, container and service within the appliance server employed by deployed application and which sometimes are often extended. Another question is what sort of object is returned by result set.get object method. In a WebLogic driver for Oracle always return a Java object that preserve the precision of the info retrieved. The WebLogic driver for Oracle return the subsequent from the get object method. For column of type number and number mn, a double is returned if the defined precision of the column are often presented by a double. Otherwise, big decimal is returned. For column of type number, because there is no explicit precision, the Java return to Java type to return is decided supported the particular value in each row, and this might vary from row to row. An integer is returned if the worth field feature a zero value functional components, and therefore the value are often presented by an integer. For example, 1.5 000 are going to be in integer, and extended is a return for a worth like 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 1 2.000. If a worth feature is non-zero fractional components, a double is returned if the fractions of the worth are often presented by a double. Otherwise, a big decimal is returned. Another question is, what is the difference between WebLogic and WebSpheres? Very more important question. Through the functionality of those two products is closure. There are minor differences within the standard that support. The difference are WebSphere is focused on a connectivity, integration, and web service. WebLogic focus in an emerging standard and easy of use of J2E. WebSphere performance is best in terms of implementation of J2E is a small more invoke and support more integration and transaction measurement system. WebSphere strictly follow J2E architecture. Another question is, what is difference between development mode and production mode of WebLogic server? Basically, development mode means Sun host is JDK default is a default JDK for the development domain. You will use the demo certificate for SSL, secure socket layer, auto deployment to admin server only is enabled at the startup server occurrence. Rotate their log file during startup admin domain. Server use an automatically created boot.properties file. 15 is the default maximum capacity of JDBC data source. The debug flag, which is employed to start out the WebLogic workshop debugger, is enabled. In development mode, any configuration change completed by a user does not need to require a log and edit session. Availability of web service test client. The username and password for node manager, default admin credential. Availability of class loader analysis tools as the default starter parameter when used is on JDK, and therefore the default starter. Another is production mode. Production mode is JRockKit is the default JDK production domain. If your employee is demo certificate for SSL, warming is display, auto deployment it is preferred only is the domain server. It is off condition when it is reached to 5 MB. Server in need rotate their log file during start of server. Promote for username and password. 25 is a default maximum capacity for the JDBC data resource. The debug flag, which is employed to start out the web server workshop debugger, is disabled. In this production mode, the user must procure a log and edit session before trying to form any configurational change. No availability of web service test client. Node manager username and password randomly generated. Availability of class loader analyze tool. No. Another question is, what is the MSI mode in WebLogic? How can you enable and disable this option? MSI is nothing but manager server independence. By default, manager servers can function independently of the administration servers. A manager server instance can start in MSI mode if the administration server is unavailable. Configure MSI mode for the administration console to start a manager server in MSI mode. perform the following. Ensure that the manager server root directory contain the configuration subdirectory. If the configuration subdirectory does not exist, copy it from the administration server root directory. Start the manager server at the command line or buying using a crypt environment means service server name tuning advanced manager server independent enable checkbox. Another question is, how do I promote user credential for starting WebLogic server? When you create a domain, the configuration would promote you to promote the username and password for an initial administrative user. If you create the domain in development mode, the word save the username and encrypted password in root identify file. A WebLogic server instance can refer to a boot identity file during its startup process. If a server instance does not find such a file, it promotes you to enter credential. If you create a domain in production mode, or if you want to change user credential in an existing root identity file, you can create a new root identity file. Thank you. Thank you for listening, and thank you for valuable response. Thank you so much. Please like and subscribe this channel. Thank you so much.